Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret Raccoon podcast, episode 188. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the last podcast of March 2022. And as you can kind of already maybe tell by my voice, it's going to be one of those episodes where I do sound a bit different. Two reasons. Mainly, it's quite early in the morning, or it was early when I originally got up. And I have a tiny bit of a sore throat, mainly because the weather did change in England. It became sunny, but it also remained windy. So me being as smart as I was, I thought, hey, I don't need my scarf anymore. And as you can already kind of tell, I'm partly paying the price for such a stupid decision. But hey, it's not as bad as it was last week. At least I don't think. Well, last podcast, I should say, to be more accurate. But yeah, we've got another odd, kind of smallish episode for the most part. I think the main reason why these episodes are a bit smaller is mainly because media and I guess the release and I guess hype or whatever you want to call it for newer stuff to be coming out is a bit slow, mainly because of the whole situation involving Russia and Ukraine at the moment. The fact that Russia has invaded Ukraine for absolutely no justifiable reason. It is an ongoing situation that has the whole world discussing and I guess to some extent making plans towards this whole event as it's transpiring. I mean, there are some positives to at least think about and I guess be happy about in some sense. Mainly the fact that a lot of people from Ukraine, mainly civilians, have successfully left the country. They're in other countries right now. Other countries and people have, welcomed them in and are looking after them, mainly being Poland and over here in England as well. There are a lot of people who have, made it over here and people have offered their houses and their spaces to the people who have unfortunately been affected, which is really positive news. And I hope that that is something that is highlighted a lot more. I understand that the war is awful and it is still ongoing. And to some extent, it's best not to think about it too much, especially in the sense that Ukraine and I guess a lot of the rest of the world pretty much has Ukraine's back to some extent. It should be over soon. I'm going to stay positive and hope that it's going to be over very, very soon. I really do want it to, for the sake of, I think, everyone, especially people in Ukraine, and even for the people of Russia as well, because this also, something that needs to be mentioned as well, this also negatively affects them. This is not a decision made by the Russian people. This is a decision made by one or a few old, grumpy, stupid men in power at the end of the day. And speaking of their leader, I just want to quickly say as well, in regard to some of the things that they have said in recent light, please ignore what they're saying. What they're saying is absolute rubbish, and it's just distraction tactics. Simply put, all it is they are just trying as best as they can to try and mess with people's minds, try and distract people, and try and reclaim some kind of sympathy or people on his side. Ignore that. It is clearly just the old ramblings and attempts of an old man who doesn't know what he is doing at the end of the day. So please ignore that. Just focus on what's actually important, and that is this war being over. They do not matter at the end of the day. Once you do something like that, you do not matter. But slight rant over about that piece of shit. Let's move on to some other more positive stuff, I guess. And that being the two main things that I managed to do over the last 2 weeks. These are things that I finished and one I just had to watch because, well, I'll get into the reasons why. I finished and played the game Shadow Warrior, the 2013 reboot/remake from Wild Hog Studios and Devolver Digital. This game was a lot of fun. As I'm sure some of you might already know, the third Shadow Warrior game is coming out, or I think it is actually out right now. And obviously I wanted to catch up because I've always liked these games. I own all the games except for the third one. And yeah, I thought it was about time. And the basic premise of Shadow Warrior essentially revolves around the main character, Lo Wang, who is essentially, I guess you could say, a businessman, assassin for hire, who kind of gets wrapped up in this whole situation regarding demons and, magical swords. And it is a first-person, very much arcade-esque, I guess, shooter in some sense. But there is, like, melee hack-and-slash elements, which kind of keeps it quite fresh, because the swordplay itself is really refreshing. It feels great just to slash things in half. There's a real great, what's the word I put it, feedback when you do it. which always just has you wanting to swing that sword in some sense. But the game overall is pretty good. I did have some issues with it, mainly the controls. For some odd reason, healing yourself is extremely difficult, at least I find. And I think it might be the same case for some other people, because I remember, I think it was, I didn't play the game for a week and I kind of forgot how to heal, and I had to look up a tutorial, to which there really shouldn't be a tutorial on how to heal in your game, because you have two options. Essentially, you can either tap the left analog stick to the right twice and hold, I believe, RT, or you can swipe across the touchpad. I was playing on PS4. Swipe across the touchpad and then press LT. The biggest problems with that is you can't do anything other than that. You cannot turn, you can't shoot, you can't run away while doing that. And weirdly enough, that's also the command of another special ability. So half the time you'll be doing another special ability, trying to heal, and yeah, it just doesn't work. Like, I've never played a game where healing is really complicated and doesn't work half the time. A lot of my deaths resulted in me just simply not being able to do it, which really spoilt the game at points. And there's like one particular enemy which was incredibly difficult to defeat, and yeah, I don't know what's up with that. If there's some kind of technique for beating it, like, please let me know. Well, I should say it's the Berserker, for reference. But yeah, no, I did not like those things. They too difficult to fight, in my opinion. But I'm not saying like, oh, game's too hard, can't beat, because I beat it. But yeah, that was one thing. But I would recommend playing, especially if you want to go back and look at this game, because this game actually does predate what's the game? Oh yeah, Doom, the brand new Doom game. And I kind of want to agree with YouTuber Matt McMuscles when he did his video on Shadow Warrior from 2013, where he said this game walked so Doom could run. And it does kind of feel like the testing ground for what became Doom and Doom Eternal, which is interesting. So I'd highly recommend playing that game or looking it up, and I guess getting excited for the third game to some extent. And the other thing I did and watched over the last 2 weeks was Turning Red, which is Disney Pixar's latest film. Now, I am going to address this real quick because it is worth addressing, unfortunately. I know that there have been discussions and controversies regarding Disney right now in terms of regarding the whole situation with the California or American bill that people have dubbed as Don't Say Gay, which Disney have unfortunately decided to not only back and support, but not essentially criticize and kind of disown to some extent, which is really bizarre, given that obviously a lot of people who do fall under the LGBTQ plus community work for Disney, and a lot of people who do enjoy their products and their films are from LGBTQ plus. So it is incredibly problematic for Disney to essentially support a bill that makes it so that, as far as I'm aware, and I would highly recommend, you doing your own research and don't take my whole heart word for it because I haven't looked at all the information, a bill that essentially means that if a parent brings up a child that turns out to be gay or transgendered or wants to make the transition, that parent is liable to go to prison for bad parenting, which is a disgusting concept in my opinion. And I really don't understand why their state or whoever is trying to do this. It really, really doesn't matter at the end of the day, a person's preference or life choices, and trying to dictate, I can't speak, I'm that angry, dictate, someone's body once again, and, their life choices or who they really are or who they want to be is ridiculous. And yeah, the whole situation with Disney trying to do this is ridiculous. Now, my distaste and dislike for them doing this is not directed at the actual animators, directors, and people who work for Disney. It is more at the higher-ups, the CEOs, and the people who have no real shame and seem to clearly have a dislike of people who aren't them, for the most part. So I want you to keep that in mind, but I think it is absolutely ridiculous that they are going about doing this, and I also do find it funny how they really try to I don't know, settle the situation by saying, oh, we're gonna put back in a same-sex kiss scene from the Buzz Lightyear thing. And it's like, why did you take that out in the first place? Like, you haven't really resolved the problem, you've just highlighted it. And besides, if you know anything about Disney, they do this all the time. They have scenes that are in reference to the LGBTQ plus community, or, you know, people of that like, and they just take the scenes out for countries like China and, oh, Russia. But I digress. That's something to, you know, keep in mind going through with this podcast. Turning Red, the film, however, is a brilliant breath of fresh air, in my opinion. It's probably one of the best Disney films I think I've seen in a long time. To be fair, I haven't seen anything from Disney since Coco, mainly because everything after Coco didn't interest me at all. It just looked generic. And this Disney film is not generic. It takes a lot of inspiration from things outside of what is known as Disney, which I think is really great. And the base concept of Turning Red, you essentially follow May, I guess it was her name, you know, who's a 13-year-old girl. She's kind of like an overachiever. She's, you know, fantastic academically. She has somewhat of a strict mother to some extent, who you can kind of tell just wants the best for her. And over the course of the story, or very early on in the story, she turns into a giant red panda whenever she gets a bit emotional. And that's all I really want to say, because I don't want to spoil it. It's a fantastic film that I think deals with a lot of subject matters and a lot of concepts that I think are very relevant for people, not only just, you know, children or, you know, young girls, but I think people who have grown up as well, because they can really relate to that matter and some of the concepts, which I think is pretty brave of, well, I was about to say Disney there, pretty brave of like the filmmakers. I think director Domichi, I believe is how you say her name. I mean, I give her all the props for putting some of the stuff that's in this film out there, and I'm really just pleased with how this film has turned out. I don't want to spoil too much because I could very easily talk about it for an hour, but it is a fantastic film that really incorporates a lot of things that I think just generally puts a smile on your face. And I was pleasantly surprised by it. I'm so glad that it's done really well and is really connected and engaged with people, because I think that's kind of one of the main points of this film was, you know, that sense of like communication and understanding and respect and all other manners of things that kind of, you know, affect you growing up as a child, going into adulthood, and, you know, emotions, feelings, you know, and whether these things and, you know, other aspects and different opinions and all that kind of stuff. Basically what I'm saying is it's a very diverse and deep film when you really think about it, despite it having the surface level of girl turns into cute, cuddly red panda, which is great. And on a quick note as well, I just want to say, if you see any reviews of people saying this film is bad, and they so happen to be a white male, mainly American, who is roughly around the age of about 35, please ignore anything they say. They are nothing more than just idiots looking for attention, essentially claiming that the film is weird or creepy, or essentially they're people who, because the film is about a 13-year-old girl and they can't relate to it or they can't understand it, the film is therefore bad. So please ignore any idiots like that. They're just looking for your attention. They just want to boost their YouTube career. Ignore them, please. If you don't even have to take my word for it, go watch the film yourself. That's all I'm going to say. But moving on to our news stories and topics, we only have 4, but some interesting ones to discuss nonetheless. The first one is going to be the trailer for Miss Marvel, not to be confused by Captain Marvel, who is the same kind of character but a different character at the same time. It's confusing. They're going to get rid of Captain Marvel anyway because of, you know, Brie Larson being a bit of a loose cannon and that film not really performing very well. But I digress. So we have the trailer for Miss Marvel, which is, I guess, going to be their next TV series, which is out very soon. Thoughts on the trailer? It doesn't look terrible, but at the same time, it feels empty, like something's missing. Like maybe it's trying to be more grand than it actually is, and overall it just looks generic, unfortunately. I kind of understand some of the hype because people like the character, but at the same time I'm like, yeah, this is nothing special. I mean, I get it. I'm not its target audience, therefore I can't really connect with it. And I'm also kind of just done with Marvel products, except for Guardians of the Galaxy. And I can't relate to this character, and I don't think a lot of people will be able to relate to this character, at least not as big of an audience as I think Disney thinks it will. Mainly because Kamala is a bit too quirky, and they're really trying to play up the whole she's weird and doesn't fit in trope. Like, I get that teenagers and young adults can come across as weird, and in my opinion, I think teenagers should embrace said weirdness and kind of really discover themselves and find themselves. But here it just kind of comes across as very standard, and just like I said, she's quirky and weird, no one gets Kamala, which, you know, it's kind of done before, and there's nothing really unique about said character in its sense. And I mean, I will give them props for making a series, you know, for teens and younger audiences and having it based on Kamala. I think it's a great idea. You know, she, I think, does work well as a TV series character as opposed to a film character, given, you know, some of the things that she, you know, may relate to and kind of go all about in that kind of sense. I mean, she is very similar to Spider-Man in some of her key concepts and themes. And she's a likable character, even in the comics and to some extent here. I think actress Imran Velina, I believe that's how you say her name, I think she's really natural in this role. I think the writing is letting her down though, but I think, yeah, she comes across as just, yeah, she knows what she's doing. She kind of, I don't know, maybe she can relate to this character, is bringing some kind of perspective of, you know, kind of already been there, done that to some extent. And yeah, the writing is very forced and painful in my opinion. Like, the line about her being like a brown girl in the city or wherever it was, yeah, that was odd. Didn't really get that line. I mean, I get that they want to be representative and diverse, but people really don't talk like that. Especially not children or teenagers. Like, no one really refers to themselves by skin color in an unironic way, in that sense. People refer to skin color and race in like memes and like TikToks, not just in a generalized state of, you know, you not feeling like you fit in that kind of sense. It's a really odd line, and it makes me kind of feel like the writers might be a little bit out of touch with both the time and I guess just how children write. I understand a child is never going to write this show, but yeah, it just feels kind of odd. I mean, if anything, she should have said something like, I don't fit in with this world. Yeah, it's generic, and, you know, but it sounds natural to some extent, because it sounds like something an actual human would say. It sounds like someone who is an outcast, someone who unfortunately is of a different race in a place with people of another race would say, or at least would feel on an emotional level. So it is a bit odd to some extent. And I guess another issue which I think Marvel and Disney kind of need to realize is, when you make a series for younger audiences and you attach the Marvel logo to it, you do run the risk of like alienating said Marvel fans to some extent. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that Marvel fans should go and hate this because it's not, you know, some dumb action film. But what I'm more or less saying is they kind of have a, you know, some level of right to dislike this and kind of ignore it because you've made something not for your core audience. But I guess to some extent I appreciate the risk they may be trying to take with this, but once again, going back to it, it looks very generic, and also it looks really dark. Like, there's some scenes that take place during the day and there's just too much contrast on them. Like, the show is very darkly lit. I don't know what that's about. My only guess is because her powers, which I'm going to get into in a bit, because her powers have a sort of like glowish, crystally look, maybe they really wanted that to stand out, so they decided to just make the show look ugly and dark. I don't know what's up with that, but it looks a bit dark and looks a bit budget in some sense. And to kind of use a comparison to the film Turning Red, which, you know, they're very similar to some extent, this series tries way too hard to be like current, or what it believes is current or charming. Now, in Turning Red, without spoiling too much, you do get a great sense of May's world and her personality, which is, you know, shown and not really told to some extent. In here, they kind of just go overboard with like all these like overlays and animations and like comic graphics, and it's not really adding anything or saying anything. It's more distracting, and it gives me a sense that this series is really trying to go for more of a style over substance approach, which never works out because, yeah, sure, people remember and people think it's funny. Oh yeah, she put like devil horns on the bully character, but You don't need to do that because we can already tell that she's a bully. I understand that that's probably what Kamala thinks of her, but you can just have a dialogue exchange with her making quips and just referencing the fact that how she doesn't like her. It's a bit odd. I don't know. And I guess the last thing I'll talk about is I know people are annoyed that they changed her powers because they're too similar to Mr. Fantastic, and Marvel thinks we're stupid and won't be able to tell the difference between what a 45-year-old man who can stretch himself in a blue costume next to a teenager from Asian Indian descent who has cosmic-esque powers and can stretch certain parts of her limbs to essentially create anything. We're not that dumb, Marvel. We're not that dumb. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter at the end of the day as long as it's good and as long as they don't, I guess, come about this being disrespectful and offensive, because they could very easily do that. And I understand that they're probably trying not to tread on anyone's toes, given that they make reference to, you know, her actual family heritage and possibly her religion. And I mean, in my personal opinion, especially in light of more recent things regarding Disney, I don't think they should ever try and tackle anyone else's religion, in my opinion. But hey, let's move on to the next trailer, the last Disney one related. I just kind of wanted to get Disney stuff out the way because I know we don't like Disney right now, but let's at least talk about these things and give credit to the actual makers as opposed to the, I don't know, businessmen and CEO and corporate side of Disney. Next thing we're going to talk about is Sketchbook, which is not the most interesting title, but essentially this is an interesting series that is going to have 6 animators, I guess mainly within the Disney house, essentially talking about illustration, animation, and how they go about it, and we're actually going to get to see them draw said characters, and I don't know, it's very interesting to see where this series might go. I mean, it does come across as a bit self-congratulatory to some extent, and I say that mainly towards the company and not these artists in particular, because I have a lot of respect for them, because you can really see like their love and their craft of artwork in some sense, and I think it is a great concept. Disney animators, illustrators, both old and young, which is great, from around the world, which is great, showing off their approach to art, what art means to them, which I think is really interesting. It's kind of a bit of a behind the scenes, but in a more solidified and specific aspect, like, oh, here's the person who, directed this film or designed this character, or, is strong at doing this thing or strong at doing that thing. That's really cool, especially if you want to get into illustration animation. Here's the thing, I'm not expecting this to be a this is how you draw kind of series, but is it going to be informative is my main question. Like, is it just going to be them talking over finished animation and drawing? Are they actually going to give some kind of insight to how you approach, certain aspects that some people may be struggling with, for example, at any point of thinking, oh, well, this is how you draw hands, or this is how you, make a character look a certain way. This is, a bad guy needs to look like this, a good guy needs to look like that. And I guess in another sense, which is a little bit of a meaner comment to say, is something like this even really relevant to some extent? Because in the way the world works, you don't need to be a part of Disney or DreamWorks or whoever to be within the industry or producing quality animation. There are animators on YouTube and on Twitter who are producing industry level animation and short films and other things. And, this whole sense of like this classical Disney look is something that I think people are kind of getting bored of, and you can kind of tell that because, yeah, Turning Red does not look like a Disney film. It looks like someone else's film, which is great. And I do wonder how that's going to impact Disney going forward, because, yeah, without spoiling too much, Turning Red takes a lot of influence from things outside of America, which is something Disney, kind of won't ever do, and kind of won't ever accept that they have taken inspiration from, well, I'll just say it, from Japanese animation. And I am interested to see if this is just going to come across as a sort of, oh, isn't Disney great and we're so classic and all that, or are they going to show some kind of insight into how the industry is going to change? Because Disney's quite behind in a lot of sense. Like, I mean, other than Turning Red, they don't really have anything that's new or interesting. And when you look at a lot of the other animated films coming out this year and other animated projects, Sing 2 was great, and that was certainly a very interesting and non-Disney film. Obviously, you got the bad guys. Disney would never ever make anything like that. And obviously another film I'm going to talk about in just a sec. But yeah, I am interested to see how the series is going to go. It might be valuable at the very least, but how it's going to be entertaining, I don't know. How do you keep something like that fresh and interesting, especially if it's going to be, 30 minutes of an illustrator talking and drawing? I mean, I'd watch it, but I don't see other people really, enjoying it as much as maybe I would, or anyone who has an appreciation for illustration and animation. Next trailer we're going to talk about is for Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. This was a big surprise. I was not expecting another Puss in Boots film, given that it's been 11 years since the first Puss in Boots film. So, yeah, long time coming. I didn't watch that film, but I do have the art book for some reason. Well, I know why, because I wanted to see the artwork. But yeah, this film is also going for like the 2D meets 3D style, and it actually works in my opinion here. I mean, I'm not sure why they've chosen to have less frames or like slower speed for the action scenes. That might just be a conscious choice. I'm not sure. Maybe it'll look better on actual screen or, in the final product. But I like the more cel-shaded look and like slightly cube design the characters have. It does look a little bit more like stylized and video game-esque to some extent, which is really nice. It kind of does stand out against something like the bad guys, like I previously mentioned, which has a slightly more like smoother kind of matte, like bolder black outline design, whereas this has a slightly more, I guess, looser and sort of like crossed shaded kind of look, which I really like. And it is an interesting direction for them to take. I also want to speculate that I bet this is what the reboot/remake of Shrek is going to look like. I feel like this is going to be like the testing ground for that. So I wouldn't be surprised if, Shrek, I don't know what they're going to call it. I wouldn't be surprised if it looks like this, because why not? If you're going to remake something as iconic as that, you've got to make it look different. That is the principle, or I'd imagine their intentions for the most part. But it is really interesting to have an animated children's film comedically handle the morality of death and how precious life is. I respect them for doing something different, and although not much story is really given in this trailer, and I'd imagine this is going to be a little bit more of a, we're going on an adventure kind of like story, and we're going to get wacky shenanigans. Obviously, we see Goldilocks and the Three Bears, who I guess are going to be a villain, which is a really funny concept. We also see like that wolf character that looks like something out of Bloodborne. Like, that was like legit really cool and really scary. And yeah, I don't know how this film is going to go. There's also not like a dog character. I don't know what's up with them. Hopefully they're not the annoying comic relief. But honestly, this film does look great. It's just another film that I'm, fingers crossed, hope is going to make this a good year for animation. Like I said, we've already had Turning Red, The Bad Guys, Sing 2, and a couple other films coming out and animation projects, which, I hope are going to be great. But yeah, I mean, I bet this film, given how generic it may be, I bet this film is going to end with like Puss sacrificing his last life for a noble cause, and because of that he gets another chance or more lives, because we can't have Puss in Boots die, simply put. I mean, money says he won't die. He's too popular of a character. But yeah, this film actually looks really nice. There isn't... I mean, it was a good trailer in that it didn't really spoil too much. It gave you the base premise. He's on his last life. He's been a bit reckless. And that should be very interesting in terms of maybe him developing or changing as a character. I mean, I don't think he's going to necessarily settle down. Not unless that's what they want for the character. And this is a... loose ending to, I guess, that Shrek universe, but it should be interesting. I am looking forward to this one. I don't know how it's going to be. Like I said, I gotta go and watch the previous film, or read the book again, I don't know. But let's talk about the last trailer, and that is going to be for the Quarry, which is going to be 2K Studios and Supermassive Games' next game. Supermassive Games are the people who made Until Dawn. They also did the Dark Pictures anthology. And I guess this is their next game, which I guess is maybe a pseudo-sequel to Until Dawn, which was a game that I really liked. Yeah, it's a game I really liked, and me and Ace actually did a playthrough of Until Dawn back in the day, but that is currently in the Raccoon Vault, and you may see that again someday, depending on how things go. But yeah, this game looks wild. Like, it's familiar in certain areas in terms of like the typical setup of, you got a bunch of characters, teens, they're going to be in location and they kind of have to survive, and you're going to be the ones making the decisions and hopefully having them, survive to the end of the day or the beginning of the day, whatever it's going to be. And I guess you're going to kind of be solving the clues or solving the mystery if you so choose to do that in terms of exploration, which is one thing I really loved about those games, is how it had a, underlining like horror, kind of creepy ambient vibe, yet you were exploring and piecing together things. So it actually added a interesting level of replay value for something that essentially kind of acts like a film to some extent. And in my opinion, if you want to go down the whole route of, video games are going to be like films, this is how you do it, not how Naughty Dog and Horizon Forbidden West tries to do it, where they keep stopping you from playing the video game. Like, they go, you can play for 30 minutes, but you got to watch 10-minute cutscene, and that kind of rubbish. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be really interesting, and they're going to try and tell like a bigger story, given how big the cast is. And I was really happy to see Justice Smith in the game as well. He sounds like he's high, so I'm interested to know if the character just sounds like that or he is like a stoner. I don't know what's going on there. But yeah, it's also nice that this game takes place partly in the day, or at least starts during the day, because I know Until Dawn was all at night pretty much. And yeah, it definitely kind of did have the color palette of blue, which maybe could get a bit repetitive at points. So hopefully this one's a little bit more diverse. Maybe having made the Dark Pictures anthology games and Hidden Agenda, they've really learnt some new stuff and kind of really want to push the envelope. And the game comes out in like a couple months. Like, they really kept this game as a massive secret, because, the moment I found out about this, I had to tell Ace. But yeah, I cannot wait for this game. Depending on how things go, I might do a live stream of it, first time playthrough, we'll see. But yeah, that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast. It was a short one, but like I said, things are a bit sparse. This week the last 2 weeks have been a bit rough for me in terms of actually finding time. I had some unfortunate things happen of recently, which has really taken precedence. So I've had a lot less time to actually focus on this podcast, but hopefully things will iron out, and hopefully we'll get more interesting things to talk about. Hopefully we'll get some more people on the podcast as well. I've been speaking with some of the cast, and we may get them on an episode or two very, very soon, mainly because I think very, very soon I'm also going to be off for a couple of weeks. So that'll be fun, finally get a break, and I'm actually going to sort out my room and that. But I guess let's talk about the video of the episode, which is going to be Vince Staples with Ramona Park's Broke My Heart, Magic. I'm not really sure what this song is called, because it's just weirdly laid out in the actual video link. So that's going to be the video of the episode, which is going to be in the description and download link for you to check out, as well as all the other trailers I talked about. Also my links on Twitter. I don't use Twitter, but you can follow me on that if you just want to get the download link and you don't want to watch the YouTube link, which is completely understandable. I like to give people options. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be this podcast. And I guess the only thing left for me to do is to end it like I always do, by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.